What if you woke up tomorrow morning, went through your normal routine, and had no idea it was the last day your entire world would ever exist? 66 million years ago, dinosaurs had already ruled Earth for more than 165 million years. They were everywhere, on land, in the oceans, and across the skies. They had survived massive climate shifts. They had adapted to almost every environment on the planet. Nothing seemed capable of stopping them. And that morning felt completely normal. Animals searched for food. Predators followed their prey. Herds moved through forests just like they had for countless generations. But far above them, something was coming. A rock the size of a mountain was racing toward Earth at an unimaginable speed. No warning, no time to prepare. In less than 24 hours, the world of the dinosaurs would be gone. Not slowly, not over thousands of years. In a single day. But here is the part that still feels almost impossible. Scientists today do not just know what caused the extinction. They have found enough evidence to reconstruct what happened during the final hours, and in some places, almost the final minutes. So how did they figure it out? What really happened during the first hour after impact? And why might that terrible day be the reason you are alive right now? To really understand what happened that day, you first have to picture what Earth looked like right before it all changed. This was the very end of the Cretaceous period, about 66 million years ago. The planet was much warmer than it is today. There were no massive ice caps at the poles, and shallow seas covered parts of the continents. Forests stretched for miles in every direction, filled with thick green plants and some of the first flowering trees. Life was everywhere. Huge plant-eating dinosaurs moved through those forests, eating leaves almost non-stop. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the largest predators ever to walk the earth, hunted across the landscape. Triceratops defended themselves with massive horns and heavy frills. Armored ankylosaurs carried club-like tails that could crush bone with a single swing. The skies belonged to giant flying reptiles, some with wingspans over 30 feet. In the oceans, enormous marine reptiles ruled the water, hunting anything unlucky enough to cross their path. This was their world, and honestly, there was no reason to think it would ever end. Dinosaurs had already survived for more than 165 million years. They had adapted to changing climates, spread across every continent, and become the dominant animals on Earth. If you had been alive back then, nothing around you would have suggested that the end was only hours away. It was just another ordinary spring day. Animals were feeding. Predators were hunting. Rivers flowed like they always had. The planet looked calm, alive, and full of movement. But while every living creature carried on as if tomorrow would come, something was already racing toward Earth from deep space. An asteroid the size of a mountain was closing in at an incredible speed. No dinosaur saw it coming. No animal sensed the danger. The countdown had already begun, and no living thing on Earth had any idea that its world was about to change forever. So, what was the thing that ended the age of the dinosaurs? It wasn't a slow climate change. It wasn't a new predator. It wasn't a disease. It was an asteroid. And not just any asteroid. This thing was about 6 to 9 miles across, roughly 10 to 15 kilometers wide. Imagine an entire mountain flying through space. That's the kind of object we're talking about. Long before it ever reached Earth, it was likely moving through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It had probably been there for millions of years, following the same path over and over again. Then something changed. The powerful gravity of Jupiter slowly pulled it off its usual orbit. Instead of circling the sun like it always had, it was sent onto a new path, and that path led straight toward Earth. Once that happened, there was no turning back. The asteroid was moving at around 20 kilometers per second. That's nearly 45,000 miles per hour. At that speed, the final part of its journey happened incredibly fast. Earth kept spinning. Life kept going. No one knew what was coming. Then the asteroid reached our planet. It slammed into Earth's atmosphere so fast that crossing the sky took only a few seconds. There was no time for anything to react, no chance to escape. Its destination was what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, near the Caribbean Sea. That single point on the map would become one of the most important places in Earth's history. In just a few seconds, the asteroid completed a journey that had started millions of miles away in space, and with one impact, it changed life on Earth forever. Then came the moment that changed everything. Picture a dinosaur standing near a river on what felt like a completely normal spring morning. It was eating, moving through its routine, with no idea that its world was about to end. Maybe it looked up for just a second. At first, it would have seen nothing more than a bright point of light in the sky. But that tiny light grew bigger almost instantly. Brighter, faster, more terrifying with every heartbeat. Just seconds before impact, the asteroid lit up the atmosphere with a flash brighter than thousands of suns. For anything close to the impact site, that flash was the last thing it ever saw. Then, the asteroid hit. The collision lasted only a fraction of a second, but the energy released was beyond anything we can really imagine. The asteroid was moving so fast that the air in front of it couldn't move out of the way. Instead, it was squeezed into an incredibly hot cloud of plasma, reaching temperatures even hotter than the surface of the Sunday. The asteroid didn't simply crash into Earth. It exploded into vapor the instant it struck. Part of Earth's crust vaporized with it. In just moments, a massive crater, nearly 180 kilometers, or about 110 miles wide, was carved into the ground. Today, we know it as the Chicxulub crater, buried beneath the Yucatan Peninsula. The force of the impact was so incredible that billions of tons of rock, molten debris, and dust were blasted high into the sky. Some of that material was thrown so far that it actually escaped Earth's atmosphere and reached space before falling back later. Then the shock wave spread outward in every direction. It raced across the land faster than anything living could escape. Everything close to the impact zone was wiped out almost instantly. There was no chance to run, no chance to hide. In less than a second, an event that had been building for millions of years had become the worst natural disaster our planet had ever seen. Today, it seems obvious that an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs. But believe it or not, scientists didn't always agree on that. For years, people came up with all kinds of explanations. Some thought small mammals ate dinosaur eggs until their populations collapsed. Others blamed new diseases or believed dinosaurs slowly died out because they became too large to survive. There were even ideas involving aliens or dinosaurs somehow leaving Earth. None of those theories held up once the evidence started coming together. The turning point came in 1980, when physicist Luis Alvarez and his son Walter Alvarez, a geologist, were studying a thin layer of clay that marked the boundary between two geological periods. They found something strange. That layer contained an unusually high amount of iridium. Now, iridium is extremely rare in Earth's crust, but it's much more common in asteroids. The amount they found was far too high to be explained by normal geological processes. Their idea was simple, but bold. A giant asteroid must have slammed into Earth, spreading iridium across the entire planet. At first, many scientists were skeptical. It sounded like an incredible claim, but then the same iridium-rich layer was discovered in rocks all over the world. Different countries, different continents, the same thin layer, the same age. That was a huge clue that whatever happened wasn't local. It was global. The final piece of the puzzle came with the discovery of the Chicxulub crater beneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Interestingly, the crater had actually been detected years earlier during oil exploration. At the time, no one realized what it really was. Only later did scientists connect it to the exact period when the dinosaurs disappeared. That connection changed everything. There is still one part of the story that scientists continue to discuss. Around the same time, massive volcanic eruptions were taking place in what is now India. These eruptions, known as the Deccan Traps, lasted for hundreds of thousands of years and released enormous amounts of gas and ash into the atmosphere. Some researchers believe those eruptions had already put Earth's ecosystems under stress before the asteroid arrived. In that view, the asteroid wasn't the only problem. It was simply the final blow. Even so, the evidence today points in one clear direction. The Chicxulub crater, the worldwide iridium layer, and shock-altered minerals found across the globe all support the same conclusion. The asteroid was the main cause of the mass extinction that ended the age of the dinosaurs. The impact itself was only the beginning. What happened next turned Earth into a place almost nothing could survive. The first thing to hit was an enormous wave of heat. When the asteroid slammed into the ground, billions of tons of molten rock and debris were blasted high into the atmosphere. But they didn't stay there. Before long, that material started falling back to Earth. As those burning fragments rushed through the atmosphere, they heated the air around them to extreme temperatures. Scientists believe the sky itself became like a giant oven. Across huge parts of the planet, forests burst into flames. Fires spread in every direction. Animals caught out in the open had almost nowhere to go. Many died from the intense heat before the flames even reached them. It wasn't just a wildfire. It was a global firestorm. Many researchers believe that a large number of land animals died during those first few hours, either burned alive or overcome by the thick smoke filling the air. But the heat wasn't the only disaster. The asteroid struck a shallow sea near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. That impact pushed an unimaginable amount of water outward, creating massive tsunamis hundreds of feet high. Those waves raced across ancient oceans and crashed into coastlines, sweeping away everything in their path. They reached far inland, destroying entire ecosystems in minutes. At the same time, the impact triggered earthquakes unlike anything Earth has experienced in recorded history. The ground shook with such incredible force that the effects could be felt on the opposite side of the planet. The collision may have also triggered volcanic activity in different regions as the shock traveled through Earth's crust. By now, the planet was being hit from every direction: fire, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. And the worst part is that surviving those first hours didn't mean you were safe. For many animals, escaping the initial impact only delayed the inevitable. The disaster that began in a single moment was just getting started, and the days ahead would prove even more deadly than the impact itself. Now here's the part of the story that I find the most incredible. Everything we've talked about so far sounds almost impossible to prove. After all, this happened 66 million years ago. So how could anyone know what took place during the first hour after the impact? The answer is a place called Tanis. Today, it's an archaeological and paleontological site in North Dakota. But back then, it was the bank of a river connected to an ancient inland sea. And somehow, that place preserved one of the most detailed records of the day the dinosaurs' world ended. When the asteroid struck what is now Mexico, it didn't just create giant ocean waves. The impact also sent an enormous surge of water rushing into that inland sea. The wave pushed upstream with incredible force, burying everything along the riverbank under thick layers of sediment almost instantly. That sudden burial froze the moment in time. When paleontologists began excavating Tanis, they found thousands of fish that had died almost immediately after the impact. Their bodies were remarkably well preserved. But the biggest discovery came when scientists looked inside the fish's gills. They found tiny glass beads trapped there. Those beads were once droplets of molten rock blasted into the sky by the asteroid. As the droplets cooled, they turned into tiny pieces of glass and rained back to Earth. Here's why that matters. The beads were inside the fish's gills, which means the fish were still alive and breathing while those particles were falling from the sky. They were pulling water through their gills at the exact moment the debris reached Earth. In other words, these fish died during the very first hour of the disaster. That single discovery gave scientists something they had never had before: a real snapshot of the first moments after the impact. Much of this work was led by paleontologist Robert De Palma, who began excavating the site in 2014. After years of careful research, his team uncovered even more evidence. They found trees mixed together with freshwater and marine animals, showing just how powerful that incoming wave had been. Researchers also discovered tiny fragments that may have come from the asteroid itself, preserved inside ancient tree resin. Some scientists even believe dinosaur remains from that very day may be buried there, although that idea is still being studied and debated. Tanis also revealed one more amazing detail. By studying growth rings inside the fossilized bones of ancient fish, researchers were able to estimate the season when the impact happened. The evidence points to spring, so the age of the dinosaurs didn't end in the middle of winter or during some quiet season. It ended in spring, when life was beginning again, when animals were breeding, laying eggs, and raising their young. That makes the story feel even more heartbreaking. And it also shows just how much we can learn from a place that stayed hidden for millions of years. If the first few hours were filled with fire, the months that followed were even worse. The explosion threw an unbelievable amount of dust, ash, and soot high into the atmosphere. Smoke from the worldwide fires only made things darker. Before long, sunlight could barely reach the surface. The sky stayed dark for months, and possibly even years. Scientists often call this an impact winter because the planet suddenly became much colder. But the drop in temperature wasn't the biggest problem. The real disaster was the loss of sunlight. Without sunlight, plants couldn't photosynthesize. And without photosynthesis, plants began to die on a massive scale. That may sound simple, but it changed everything. Plants are the foundation of almost every food chain on land. Once they disappeared, the giant plant-eating dinosaurs lost their food supply. It didn't matter how strong or how successful they had been before. There was simply nothing left to eat. Then the predators faced the same fate. As the herds disappeared, the meat-eating dinosaurs also began to starve. One group after another vanished as the entire ecosystem fell apart. It was like pulling the first card from a giant house of cards. Everything else came down with it. In just a matter of months, an ecosystem that had taken millions of years to develop completely collapsed. The extinction of the dinosaurs wasn't the only mass extinction in Earth's history. Scientists believe our planet has gone through at least 5 major extinction events. And surprisingly, this wasn't even the largest one. An earlier event at the end of the Permian period was even more devastating, wiping out around 96% of marine species and about 70% of land species. Even so, the asteroid impact remains one of the most dramatic turning points in Earth's history. Around 75% of all species disappeared. The non-avian dinosaurs were gone. The giant marine reptiles vanished. The flying reptiles disappeared. Countless plants, insects, and marine organisms were lost as well. An age that had lasted more than 165 million years came to an end in what was, geologically speaking, the blink of an eye. An entire world was gone, and the planet would never look the same again. After hearing about everything that happened, one question naturally comes to mind. How did anything survive? The answer is actually pretty surprising. The animals that made it through weren't the biggest or the strongest. In many cases, they were the smallest. Small mammals had a huge advantage. Back then, they weren't the dominant animals on Earth. Most were no bigger than a mouse or a rat, living quietly in burrows while dinosaurs ruled the surface. When the heat wave swept across the planet, those underground shelters gave them a chance to survive. Later, when food became scarce, they had another advantage. They weren't picky eaters. They could survive on seeds, nuts, insects, and even decaying organic matter. While larger animals needed enormous amounts of food every day, these tiny mammals could get by with much less. They simply adapted better to a world that had suddenly become harsh and unpredictable. They weren't the only survivors. Some birds made it through the catastrophe. In fact, birds are the direct descendants of dinosaurs that survived. Crocodiles, turtles, snakes, lizards, fish, and many insects also managed to endure. The disaster completely changed the rules of survival. Being huge was no longer an advantage. Being flexible was. And that's where the story takes an incredible turn. For more than 165 million years, mammals had lived in the shadows. They stayed small because giant dinosaurs dominated nearly every environment on Earth. But once the dinosaurs were gone, everything changed. Suddenly, countless ecological niches were empty. There was room to grow, room to adapt, room to evolve. Over millions of years, those tiny mammals spread into habitats that had once belonged to dinosaurs. Some became the ancestors of elephants. Others eventually led to whales, horses, large predators, and primates. And much later, one branch of those primates became us. It's amazing to think about. If that asteroid had missed Earth 66 million years ago, dinosaurs might still have ruled the planet. Mammals may have remained small, hidden creatures, and humans might never have existed at all. In a strange way, Our own story began on the very day the dinosaurs' story came to an end. So why does a story from 66 million years ago still matter today? Because the danger never completely disappeared. Asteroids are still out there. Right now, scientists around the world are constantly watching the skies, tracking objects that pass close to Earth. They calculate their paths years, even decades, into the future, looking for anything that could become a real threat. The difference is that we aren't as helpless as the dinosaurs were. In recent years, scientists successfully tested a new idea by deliberately crashing a spacecraft into a small asteroid to change its orbit. It was a simple experiment, but it proved something incredibly important. If we detect a dangerous asteroid early enough, we may actually be able to push it off course before it ever reaches Earth. That's an amazing thought. The dinosaurs never had a chance. We just might. But maybe the biggest lesson isn't really about asteroids. It's about life itself. The dinosaurs ruled this planet for more than 165 million years. They were the most successful large animals Earth had ever seen. Yet one single day changed everything. It's a reminder that even the strongest species can be vulnerable when faced with something completely unexpected. At the same time, this story isn't only about extinction. It's also about survival. Life didn't end that day. It adapted. It recovered. It found a way forward. Small mammals survived and eventually gave rise to countless new species, including us. And not all dinosaurs disappeared either. Every bird you see today is a living descendant of those ancient dinosaurs. A sparrow in your backyard. A crow sitting on a fence. An eagle soaring overhead. They all carry a small piece of that ancient world. Maybe that's the most hopeful part of this entire story. The last day of the dinosaurs wasn't just the end of one world. It was also the beginning of another, our world. And even after one of the greatest disasters in Earth's history, life proved something remarkable. No matter how hard it's tested, it has an incredible way of starting over. It's hard to believe that one single day could erase more than 165 million years of history. One asteroid didn't just wipe out the dinosaurs. It completely changed the future of life on Earth. And if that asteroid had never hit our planet, there's a very good chance our own story would have been completely different. Mammals might have stayed small, hidden in the shadows, and humans may never have existed at all. But here's the part I find most amazing. The dinosaurs didn't disappear completely. Every bird you see today is living proof of that. Whether it's a sparrow, a crow, or an eagle, they're all descendants of the dinosaurs that survived one of the worst disasters our planet has ever seen. Maybe that's the biggest lesson this story leaves us with. Life is incredibly fragile. Sometimes everything can change in a single moment. But life is also unbelievably resilient. Even after the greatest catastrophes, it adapts, it survives, and somehow it finds a way to begin again. That's what happened 66 million years ago. And that's why this isn't just the story of how the dinosaurs died. It's also the story of how our world began.